everybody. Welcome to LTG Live. Peter Reeves, my co-host. How are you, my friend?
What up, man? I'm doing good. How are you?
Look good. I feel like you got a haircut since the last time we were on the stream.
Earlier this morning. Early this morning.
There you go. Love it, man.
I said, I'm going on LTG. I got to be smooth. I got to have a cut.
Old headphones again, so that's good. The people.
This is me forgetting my AirPods at home, man. Come on.
Well, listen, a bunch of you logging on right now. Welcome again to LTG Live. It is a live stream first. It is a podcast then second, which you can always find on Apple, on Spotify. You can also find it on the Lead the Generation website. And so if you're listening live, welcome to the conversation. Go ahead, jump into the comments.
Yes.
Tell us who you are. Tell us where you're watching from. Ricky, we see you. You're the first one to comment today, Ricky. We love you, bro. And we're glad that you're with us today. Peter, I got just a fun question. I feel like people in the audience, they just want to know like this from your life, like your upbringing, right? Because you grew up in Philly, right? A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's my question for you real quick. What was the name of your first car?
Ooh.
Like what, how you named your cars, or even if you did. So tell the people what they need to know.
Okay. They're going to judge me, but it's okay. It was a Mitsubishi Galant 2005. It was cherry red, and her name was Shaniqua. She was fiery. I was like, let me get in this Shaniqua. So man, that was her name. My mom was like, why would you pick that? And I was like, Mom, don't try to control me, so.
Is your wife okay with that? It's good? Yeah.
It was good. I crashed it 3 months later.
Yeah, okay, so she was happy at that point.
And then I got a black Mitsubishi Galant, and I named him Carl because I was like, he's a dude, he's a little rusty. I was like, Carl, crashed him a year later. And then I had a Toyota Corolla, which just went nameless. what's that church out there? Erwin McManus. What's the name of their church? Mosaic. They did an unknown conference. I was like, yeah, this car is just unknown. It's mysterious.
No one even needs to know.
It was a Toyota Corolla. I was like, this car is just unknown. There's no name to this conference or this car.
So good.
What was yours?
Oh man, dude, I had a terrible like white Plymouth Horizon hatchback, something or other, that would never start in the rain. It wouldn't start in the rain. Yeah, it was the weirdest thing. I didn't even name it, but like if it rained at all, then the car wouldn't start. So I had to check the weather all the time, and then if I knew it was going to rain later in the day when I wanted to drive, then I had to go out and let it just sit in the driveway and run nonstop until it warmed up. It was the weirdest thing, dude. I don't even.
That sounds like luxury.
I had an AM radio. That's it. Just AM radio in that thing, dude. It was amazing.
Just AM.
No, there's no FM because that was like the next upgrade. We couldn't afford that.
Okay. All right. Cool. I never even heard of that before, but wow.
You don't even know. You probably never even listened to AM radio. You don't even know what it is. You're like,
I don't even know how to get to it, man. For real.
Radio and all that stuff. But, dude, we're gonna have a great conversation today.
Yes,
in a minute, we will introduce Jeremy Donovan, who is our guest today. And so a bunch of you are logging on right now. We're glad you're with us. Go ahead and do us a favor and drop in the chat where you're watching from, and even share it too. Ricky, we see you. Your first car, the Volkswagen GTI 1989. Let's go.
Woo!
Good. That's really good. We're gonna have a great conversation today. Next week, evangelist Jamie Paul is going to be with us on the live stream, and Jamie travels the world, the nation, preaching and teaching on generosity in particular. And so he's going to have some incredible principles and insight for us on how to live generous lives. And so I'm excited for that conversation, which is going to be great. And then just want to remind you that the LTG Live is brought to you by World Serve International. And Peter and I love these guys. We both have lots of personal connection with them and what they do, making a difference in sub-Saharan Africa. Over 790 million people that don't have access to clean drinking water, and World Serve is making a huge difference. And so if you're not connected with them, we'd encourage you, go to their website, worldserveintl.org. Check out who they are, what they do. They're going to be great. So, hey, Peter, introduce our guests. Jeremy Donovan to us. It's going to be an incredible conversation. And youth pastors, those of you that are listening in, Jeremy's going to share a bit of a story, but also some real practical tips for how we can help students that are going through incredibly difficult issues. You're going to want to take lots of notes today. It's going to be good. It's going to be really good.
Yeah, I don't really know Jeremy like that, but I followed him for a long time as a young youth pastor. Here's a guy who's absolutely crushing it and is known not just throughout our fellowship, but throughout the world as one of the premier youth pastors. And now he's doing different things that we're going to hear about. But he's incredible, always led at a high level. Actually, he doesn't even know this. The last time I heard him speak live was at National Fine Arts in Kentucky. Like, what? Kentucky. And he just crushed it, man. He was killing it with fine arts at his group at the time. But he's just amazing, and he makes disciples, and we're glad to have him on the stream today. Put your hands together. Jeremy Donovan, people. What's popping?
Let's go.
What's up? How are you guys?
Good to see you, bro.
Good to see you.
Everyone watching right now, drop a hello in the chat. And then also, we normally say show Jeremy some love, but Peter and I are already jealous because you got palm trees behind you. So like,
yeah. You don't have to flex on us like that, bro. We get it.
Seriously.
Well, I'm at a hotel and I was trying to find a quiet place that I didn't have to wear a mask, and basically that's outside. So that's where I'm at right now. And
we believe you. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's actually just a Zoom background. I just did a Zoom background. That's what it is.
I was in Florida. I know Peter's from Michigan and Aaron's from Pennsylvania, and I just wanted him to show what the other half of the world is living like right now.
Yeah. I'm actually from Dallas, so I just got out of Snowmageddon and hopped on down here. But,
this is like a huge blessing to you to actually be free from like the winter freeze down there. But
it was cold for a minute, and we don't know how to do that in Texas, man. So, but yeah, I'm down at Palm Beach at a pastor's round table trying to learn some stuff, and it's a hard place to have a meeting. It's just tough. So
Peter, we going right now. I'm sending you a ticket. We're on our way.
Yeah. I got my sunscreen. I'm good to go.
I keep looking for Donald. I know President Trump lives like 5 miles from here, but I haven't seen him yet. So.
He's gonna pop in. He's gonna say hello.
Yeah, right. Sorry for bringing up the name.
Thanks so much. Thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it. Appreciate you squeezing us into what you're calling a pastor's roundtable. We really know it's just vacation, but it's cool. We love you anyway.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I do the same thing when I tell people, I'm like, man, give to my ministry. I gotta feed hungry kids, my hungry kids.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, buy my book, please.
True.
So.
This is so true. So true. Well, we're just glad. We're glad you're joining us. I'm glad you're here because I feel like you're my twin brother, and so I finally team up with me against
Bald
Peter.
guys unite.
Yeah, come on, let's go. But we're excited to have you on today, and you and I kind of getting to know one another, and we were putting together this conversation and really wanted to dial in on parts of your life story and just the redemptive part of what God has done in your life, and also how you've been able to use that to minister to students that are struggling. Lots of incredibly difficult issues, addiction and depression and discouragement and mental health and so many different things. And so we're excited, Peter and I, just to kind of pick your brain. And I know there's a lot of youth pastors listening in today that are looking forward to just not only the inspirational part of your life story, but also like, hey, how do I do this? Boy, it can be hard. It can be really hard, struggling and wrestling with students in some of these issues. So I want to kick it right to you, Jeremy. And I just wanted to give you the opportunity to take a couple minutes and share maybe like the Spark Notes version of some of the big points in your life. And then Peter and I are excited to just converse with you and ask questions and walk through some practical tips that you've prepared to help us as youth pastors. So
for sure.
Anyway, bro, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, actually, it's great to be with you guys. So thankful for both of you and you guys as leaders, and just honored to be on with you guys today. But I'm also, like Pastor Peter, I'm a Philly boy. I grew up in Philadelphia area. Yeah, you didn't know that?
I didn't know this either. This is great.
Yeah, so
where did you grow up?
I grew up mostly in Lansdale, and then spent a lot of time in South Philly and Columbus Avenue and Kensington a little bit. So just kind of all over.
Just went from here to here, bro.
Yeah, just riding the trains. So
you just jumped.
But yeah, I grew up in Philadelphia area most of my life. Pastor's kid. But I was one of those PKs that I just got real angry at the church and angry at people. Had some tough things happen to me as a kid. Not from my family. Actually, my mom and dad are amazing, man. Like just amazing pastors and good people. But um, so about 13, 14 years old, I just started getting into drugs and drinking and that kind of stuff. By 16, 17, just, I'm trying to go through it quick. 16, 17, I had left the church. I moved out of my house at 18 years old. And I was just running the streets in Philly. And basically all the bad stuff that came with addictions came with my life. By 19 years old, I was a teen father. I was in and out of mental institutions. I've seen 7 mental institutions as a young person. I got saved in a mental institution, so Jesus will find you anywhere. But I was just running the streets. I had a really bad drug addiction most of my life. Most of that time in my life, about 10 years of my life was just covered in addiction and everything that came with it. At 21 years old, I had a brain aneurysm. I was doing so much cocaine that my brain actually exploded. They don't know how I lived through it. I had brain surgery at 21. Actually, I needed to live in Philadelphia because at the time, the University of Pennsylvania was the only hospital in the nation that did the surgery that I needed because where my brain had exploded, it was in the center of my brain. So they actually had to go up through my leg, in through my heart, into my head. And they tied off that part of my brain with platinum coils. So if I wasn't in Philly, I wouldn't have lived. So in a way, God just plans your journey. Even when you're running from him, it's like he knows where to have you, even when you're running from him. And I remember going to that surgery. They told me I wasn't going to live. They were surprised I lived through, because usually when the aneurysm explodes, you die instantly. And so they didn't know why they were talking to me or anything. And so they pretty much told me it was going to be a long shot that I would live through the surgery. And I remember praying to God in that moment. And I just said, God, if you let me live through this, I'll live for you for the rest of my life. And I went through the surgery, about 6 months recovery. I had to learn how to walk, talk, all that kind of stuff again. I'm actually still peripherally blind from it. So when they tied off that part of my brain, I lost different things. I learned most of it, but I still can't see out the side. It's like a horse almost with the blinders. That's my visual cortex, I guess is what they call it. And so kids in youth ministry always thought it was funny. They would like throw balls at my head and stuff. And I'm like, man, you're making fun of a disabled guy. Like, this isn't cool. But but it's cool. My wife likes it. She always jokes that she knows, it helps me with lust. She knows when I'm looking. So, because I have to turn my head to look anywhere. So I keep my blinders on. But, all jokes aside, like I went through this 6-month recovery. And then when I got out of the hospital, it was probably about 3 weeks later, and I was back on drugs, back in the streets. And I remember my neurosurgeon just like, what are you doing, man? Like, God saved your life. He was a Christian, actually, which was awesome. And he's like, now you're just back at it. And I didn't understand it. And that's when I actually like really started kind of going crazy. I actually thought, I don't know why, but I pictured God back then as like a dictator. And I really thought that because I broke my promise, God wanted to take my life. And so I started going into this like really actually crazy, like, when's God gonna kill me because I broke my promise type thing. And probably about 8 months after my surgery, I just gave up, and I was like, I don't want God to kill me, so I'm gonna kill myself. And I had sold pills to cover my addiction costs. And I took about 200 pills, and I sat down on my couch and I just waited to die. And
Wow.
in that moment was the first time I can say I think I actually heard God speak to me as a father. And he just said, what are you doing? I mean, I literally heard that, and I know it wasn't the drugs. And so I was like, God, I can't live up to your expectations. I just can't do it. I don't know how to live for you. I don't know how to make it work. And I'm just over it, and so I'm going to take my life before you do. And I heard the Lord speak to me that moment. He said, it's not about the promises you make to me. It's about the promise that I made to you. And I sent my son to die for your sins. And when you accept that it doesn't matter about your promises. You just get to accept my promise. And I just really began to take that. So I called the cops. They actually knew where I lived because I dealt a lot in the area. So, a bunch of them came. I knew the first officer that came through the door knew me because I'd been involved with, hanging out with him often. He would pick me up on the streets and stuff. And so they put me back in the mental institution, Norristown Building 50. I was looking at some charges because I had a lot of drugs in my house, but grace was just all over the place. And the judge, they kept me in the mental institution for a few months, and I went into solitary confinement, which is 23 hours in the cell, 1 hour out. So 23 hours a day I was by myself, and it was crazy. You would think you would go nuts in a place like that, and you can. It's very possible, but I was just soaking in Jesus's love. I mean, it was the first time I really began to experience the love of Jesus. And so after a few months in there, they released me. Believe it or not, it's kind of funny. They released me to West Palm Beach, which is where I'm at right now,
Wow.
to go to a rehab center here. And that was 20 years ago this year that I
Man,
went to that rehab center. And while I was there, it was a crazy time. And I had been in a mental institution for, quite a few months. And so you don't sleep well in those places because there's crazy
yeah.
people in there. And so I remember getting to this rehab that was on the beach, and I was like, man, and I just crashed. And when I woke up, there was this huge 6'3" black guy standing over me. And he was like, "Does anybody told you they love you today?" And I was like, "God, if you let me live through this, I'll live for you for the rest of my life." But so, but I was like, "No, sir." And he's like, "Well, I do. Jesus does. Now get up and make your bed." And he did that for like 3 weeks. Every morning, he'd wake me up. "Anybody told you they love you today?" I'm like, "No, sir." He said, "Well, I do. Jesus does. Now get up and make your bed." And finally, I was like, "Dude, I'm tired of this. Like, I don't like making my bed. This is weird. This dude wakes me up like this all the time." So I got up and I was like, "What are you doing, man? Like this is weird that you're doing this every week and every day. And why do I gotta make my bed?" And so he went into it. And he's like, "I tell you I love you because I do. I tell you Jesus loves you because he does more. I tell you to make your bed because drug addicts don't do anything normal in their life, and that's the first normal thing you can do. And so that's why I do those things." And then he looked at me and he was like, "Why are you so angry?" He's like, "You come from a good family. Your mom and dad are pastors. They're like sending you money, like trying to help you. Like, why are you so angry?" And I don't know why, but in that moment, I just felt like I could tell somebody. So for the first time in my life, I was like, "You want to know why I'm angry? It's because when I was a kid, about 9 years old, I used to go visit my grandmother in Cleveland. We didn't have money in Pennsylvania, so we went to vacation in Cleveland. I didn't know that you were supposed to go on vacation like places your family members don't live until like later on in life. Like we just always went where family was. And so my grandmother owned a bar in the area in Cleveland. They were bar owners and they lived above it. And from about 9 to 13, there was a close friend of the family that would abuse me as a kid. And it brought this anger into my life that I couldn't tell anybody. I started using drugs to cover up that anger and that abuse and those type of things. And I just didn't want to feel the pain anymore. And then my choices, like I said, I was a teen father at 19. The government took my rights away to see that child. I still haven't seen him in 22 years. That's part of my restoration story. I pray for the day that we're restored. So I had all this anger that from the choices I made. So choices that people made against me, and then choices I made brought this anger that I just didn't want to feel. And if you know anything about drugs, that's all it is. It's just self-medication. It's just medicating yourself so that you don't feel the pain of what you've been through. So anyway, he told me the story of blind Bartimaeus. And in that story, in Mark chapter 10, it actually says that, he cried out to Jesus, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And then he threw off his cloak. I know probably most of you have read that. And this guy looked at me in that room. He said, "Most people miss that cloak." He said there was a reason behind that cloak. Back then, your cloak mattered. If you were a businessman, you had a certain color cloak. If you were in royalty, you had a certain color cloak. If you were tax collector, you had a certain color cloak. And you actually had to go before a court and prove that you had the right to beg. You had to prove that you were blind or that you were disabled, and they would give you a cloak that you wore on the streets, and that meant you were a beggar. You had the right to beg. So when Bartimaeus threw off his cloak to go to Jesus to be healed, he threw off his right to be beg or to beg. He threw off his right to beg. And then he looked at me and he said, "Man, you got a right to be angry at what happened to you. You got a right to be angry at the things in your life. But if you give up that right and you go to Jesus, he's going to heal you." And so that's what happened, man. I sat in that room, actually started screaming out, "The Son of David, have mercy on me." And
Wow.
I went to Jesus and I just said, "I give up my right. I give up my right to be angry at this guy. I give up my right to be angry at myself. I give up my right to be angry at my mistakes. And I give up my right to be angry at the church." I had held so much anger towards the church, just different things that were said against me. And, religious people, when you're messing up and they're just like, "Man, you're just messing up. You typical pastor's kid," and all that kind of stuff. And I gave up all those rights, man. And God healed me that day.
Man,
And
Wow.
from that day on, I just took this journey to the other way, where I was just like, you know what? I'm going to live for him for the rest of my life. And so while I was in rehab, I reached out to a Bible school, long story short, and went to Bible college. They let me in for free. They were crazy. And I just started living for Jesus. And that was right here in Palm Beach. So it's kind of cool to be back here 20 years later.
yeah,
So,
yeah, that's so cool, man. Man,
mhm.
I can't stop thinking about the individual, the dude that kept telling you consistently for 3 days or for 3 weeks that he loved you, that he
Yeah,
helped you. I pray for leaders like that, man.
right.
Why do you think it's so hard to be those kind of leaders like that guy was for you?
Um, every day I wake up and I pray, "Lord, help me be more like Jesus." Because as humans, it's really easy to get frustrated with people and quit on people,
Mm,
especially when they're not making the right choices. You're just like, "Oh man, he's never going to get it right," or "She's never going to do it," and you just get frustrated and you almost want to let people go. But Jesus never lets people go. Jesus is consistent in loving you no matter what. And so I think that's the biggest thing is like, if we really say we're Christians, we need to be like Jesus, which means you just don't quit on people
Hmm.
because of their choices, because how they react to you in youth ministry. I mean, probably most of us got into youth ministry thinking that everybody was just going to love us. And it's just not true. I mean, you just get
right.
these kids that look at you like you're an idiot and they just hate you. And you just got to keep going and consistently saying, "Jesus loves you. Jesus loves you. I love you." And as you do that consistently, you'll see the barriers break down, especially with the kids that are dealing in just horrible situations. You just can't quit on them. And you got to be like Jesus and be like, "Man, I'm there for you. I love you." And you'll see that it may not be at first. I mean, I've had kids that just like look at me like I'm cheese, man. And like, they just don't even care. They don't want nothing to do with me. And I'm just consistently trying to break down those walls. And it's crazy because then that one day hits and it's like, boom. And then they open their lives to you. So I
Yeah,
love it.
that's cool. That's cool. Our topic today, obviously, if you're just tuning in, is tackling tough issues of youth ministry. And so, before we like move on further in the conversation, this is for both of you. What do you think are the toughest issues in youth ministry today for Jeremy or Aaron? What do you think they are?
You want to go, Aaron?
Yeah, I'm gonna let you go
Okay.
first, man. I'm still captivated
Um,
by your story, man. I'm trying to take it all in. I'm trying to the whole time, bro.
So, it's crazy. Youth ministry today is just different. I mean, obviously, you just deal with so many things, but I think identity is a huge issue when these young people are trying to find their identity and they don't know their identity in Jesus. And so, they're finding their identity through social media or through drugs or, even, I think I even found my identity when I was younger through depression. Like, well, I'm a depressed kid. But when you start to find your identity in Jesus, that's when it really helps. So, but yeah, depression, everything's more accessible today than when I was a kid. And that's a really scary thing, but also Jesus can handle it. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's really good. What
Yeah,
about
I
you,
think.
Aaron? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean that would have been my first choice. What Jeremy said, identity. I think the influences are so much greater now. You have a
mhm,
generation that is walking around with one of these with them all the time. And so you got a generation of kids that are basically constantly being influenced. There's constant voices in their life. There's the constant input of whoever's trying to tell them live this way or do this or like this or act this way. And that also creates the constant need in a young person's life for affirmation. So when I publish something, produce something, someone like it, someone affirm it, someone tell me, that I'm right or that this is good. And so that really does tie back into what you said, Jeremy, where you got a generation of kids that are constantly looking for who am I and what's my identity. And I think they're in crisis mode when it comes to those identity issues. That's at the core. A lot of the story is really unpacking the symptoms of the core issue. Which I don't know who I am. I haven't built my life on something that's stable. I've built it on feelings. I built it on emotion. I built it on a false sense of identity. And so now I'm constantly experimenting with all these different external things in order to try to meet an internal need that I can't seem to fill. So Jeremy, let's kind of transition here and let's just talk practically here. There's a bunch of you that are listening now. There's there's those that are going to be watching back on the Lead Generation Facebook page or YouTube channel, or maybe they're listening back on the podcast. How do we do this? Let's your story's unreal. Peter and I were actually texting one another during your story, like this is like wow, this is amazing. I think for both of us, not having the opportunity to hear you unpack your story in that way, we're just kind of like, "Phew, this is unreal." But one of the things we'd like to do on this live stream is just try to be practical and come alongside of youth pastors across the country. Hey, here's some ways that you can help students that are struggling. So we've got a list of ideas here that you gave me before. Go ahead and jump in wherever you want, and let's talk about each of these. And Peter, we'll hit any questions that you want to hit from a youth ministry perspective. But let's go.
Yeah, I think the first one that I would always tell people is just find where they're bleeding. And that's just what that guy did in that room for me, is he actually found where I was bleeding. I mean, I was in church worlds and different things, and they would always focus on the behavior versus the bleeding. So why are you doing this? Why are you doing drugs? Why are you acting out? Why are you sleeping around? Why are you doing these things? Instead of going, where are you bleeding? And that's what that guy did for me. He finally just broke past the behavior and found out what I was hurting. And in that room, man, I mean, when he told me that story of Bartimaeus, I was 21, 22 at the time. And I went from 22 in that room to 9. I mean, it was like I just went right back to that hurting kid. And it's like I had never left that bleeding, hurting, abused kid. And so I often tell kids that are acting out, crazy, is just like, listen, where are you bleeding? I don't need to know your whole story, because a lot of times people want to just go through everything, and that can actually just even break. I'm like, I don't need to know your whole story. Just tell me where you're bleeding. What hurts? What have you hidden that you just can't tell anybody, whether it's something you did or somebody else did, but what's making you bleed? Because that's what we need to find and let Jesus heal it. I can't heal it. Nobody else can heal it, but Jesus can heal it if you recognize it and you give it to Jesus. That's the hard part, is just recognizing it. When you hide it and just like, man, I'm just going to sit here and bleed and not let anybody know. That's what really hurts you. You've got to recognize it and at least let Jesus know. That's what I tell people, at least talk to Jesus about it. And really work on where that's bleeding. One of the other points I put is there's a reason to every reaction. That was something that I actually learned from an old gangster dude in South Philly. I was working on the Italian market, and this dude was acting up on the Italian market. You'd always get that sometimes. I'm sure you've been there, Peter, there at 9th and Washington. And he looked at me while this dude was acting up, and he's like, man, every reaction has a reason. When people react to you that way, or so it's like, especially in youth ministry, I had to learn, like, when you try to bring your authority and you're like, don't do that, and they react crazy to you. I mean, I've had kids try to fight me. I had a kid punch me in the face one time, all kinds of just crazy stuff. And the thing you have to realize is their reaction to what you did, there's a reason there. They're bleeding somewhere. It's not normal for this to happen, and it's not you. That's the thing you got to remember. When kids in youth ministry are dogging you and ignoring you, or they don't want to be near you, you can guarantee there's probably sin in their life or something that's
Something's going
making
on.
them do that. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and you can look at the behavior, or you can go to them and sit down and say, "Where are you bleeding, man? How do I help you? I don't even
Yeah.
care what you're doing." I've told it to kids, "I don't care what you do. You don't impress me. I don't care what you're doing, and you don't even frustrate me. I just want to know, how can I help you? That's why I'm in your
Yeah.
life, you
That's
know."
so good,
But
man. I wanted to
yeah,
go back real quick. Sorry to cut you off, but
no,
what you
you're
said
good.
about the bleeding thing, like all I could think about is that most leaders, like they hear this point, they think it's good, but then they don't. Then when they're in the moment, they realize when someone's bleeding, it's messy, right?
Right,
Like it's super messy. And
right,
if you're one of those people that the environment has to look perfect or this has to be perfect for you to like make a move on what needs to happen, like my wife is obsessed with these like Grey's Anatomy shows. Whenever she thinks she's a
yeah,
doctor, people, I walk into the kitchen, she's dissecting chickens and stuff. I'm like, yo, what are you doing? But like, when you see like things happen in the OR, like there's all this bleeding, the doctor can no longer see what they need to continue to do. Like, the first thing they need to do is
right.
stop the bleeding.
Stop the
And like
bleeding.
I think
Yes.
as leaders, if we could get that yes, my
Hmm.
hands are gonna get messy. Even the environment we're in might get messy, but I'm going to do everything I can to stop
Right,
this because the blood is life. It's life to, and even in situations in ministries, like
hmm,
we have to know that. Like, how
right.
can we not know that? So I
Yes,
really love that point. Love
And
that point.
yes.
Peter, I'll just tag on that real quick. I just had that conversation today with one of our leaders at the school of ministry that I serve there on the leadership team, Allison Park Leadership Academy, and I was just talking about like discipleship is messy. I use that exact same phrase that you
Yeah,
just used, and I think we do forget that. Like we have this like peaceful, perfect vision of Jesus with his disciples, and they just sat around and studied
right,
the Bible and sang songs and encouraged one another, and I mean, and it's just like, dude, those dudes were drama queens. Peter was a
right,
mess. Thomas didn't believe
right.
anybody. I mean, dude, I mean, it's just all drama. So I I used to say this in youth ministry when I was youth pastor full time. I'd say to my leaders all the time that discipleship is found in the drama. Like,
Right.
just remember that discipleship is found in the more drama there is, the more opportunity there is for
Yep.
discipleship. It's not easy. You're a shepherd. You're gonna get dirty when you're working with sheep. This is just what we
Yeah.
do, right? It's what
Right.
we do.
Yeah.
So
Right.
good, Jeremy. This is so
Absolutely.
helpful.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
So true.
Peter.
But
And
I
then
think too,
oh, go ahead,
I
Joe.
was gonna say, I think in that too, it's a big thing I've learned on how to deal with it is Jesus was a person that asked questions even when he knew the answers, and sometimes the best way you can get, especially these hard case kids that are just dealing with stuff, is to not give them your information, but ask them the questions that get them to your information. Does that make sense? And so when you ask the right questions, they can answer it themselves instead of, because some unsolicited information is annoying. And so sometimes you just have to ask the questions to get them to understand where they're going, and that's a good way to deal in that bleeding, I think, is just, man, learn to ask the right questions. So,
Yeah, Peter. Back to you. Where were you gonna say there a minute ago?
I was gonna say, like, point number two, that every reaction has a reason. It's like every reaction has a reason, and my reaction communicates how I'm gonna. Like, my reaction
right,
communicates if they can trust me. You know what I mean?
right,
Like, this is what I've learned about. I've only been in the youth ministry world for 6 years, but I'm learning that I can't react in these big grand gestures to kids that are doing crazy things or crazy situations are happening in their life, because if I look surprised, they know I don't know how to deal with it. You know what I
yes,
mean? If I look overwhelmed, they're like, nah, this guy, he's not, because they can see right through that. And so every
hmm,
reaction has a reason, and your reaction communicates if they can trust you, you
yes,
know?
and also too, with that, you
Ooh.
don't have to relate to everything. You just have to love people. One of the worst
Right.
things you can do sometimes is just be like, "Oh, I understand," when you don't. I think it hit me the hardest one time. I had a young person in my church that he lost his mom in a car accident. And I was like, man, I understand. I lost my grandpa at a young age and it really hurt. And he just looked at me like, "You're trying to compare your grandpa to my mom?" And I apologized to him. I'm like, "You're right. I'm so sorry, man." Like, and that taught me something. You don't always have to relate or be like, "Oh, I understand what you're going through." We don't have to understand what they're going through. We just have to love them. And
Mhm.
and if you love them and you show you're there for them, I think sometimes some of the best things you can say is, "It's really painful." And I don't even know if I know a pain like that. and I'm sorry, but I'm here for you. You
Yeah.
know?
I mean, it's
So
right to the scripture though. Even a foolish man seems wise when he's silent.
right.
Just like it's just like
Yes.
they're
Yes.
talking, and when I can't relate, dude, I'll be honest with you. This takes when you said that phrase, it takes me all the way back to every youth leader I ever had. That I'm like, oh yeah, my parents are like getting a divorce, and they're like, yeah, man, I get it. I'm like, no, you don't get it, bro.
No,
You
you
don't
don't.
understand.
Yes.
Like I
Yes.
remember being that student
Yes.
and feeling those thoughts. And it's so easy when you're on this side of it now to be like, I'm with it, I'm woke. And it's like, you don't have to be
Mm-hmm.
woke, you just have to be
Mm-mm.
real. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, just be real with where you are and listen to what they're saying. And I probably think
Yes.
this is too. This is why our students are creating Finstas. This is why
Right.
they're doing crazy stuff online. This is why they're naked in all their TikToks. Is because they're trying to
Mm-hmm.
capture somebody's attention to just listen to them, to just be able to share,
Right.
hey, this is what's actually going on. I'm crying out for help. You know what I mean? So I really
So
like
good.
them. Point number 2.
Don't
So,
be woke.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, hey, let me just take a break here, and let's just say real quick, for those of you that are joining us midstream, Peter and I are so honored today that we're able to talk on this topic of tackling the tough issues of youth ministry. And Jeremy Donovan is our guest today. And if you jumped in late, you're going to want to go back and you're going to want to listen to the first half of this episode. Jeremy's story, he just unpacks some powerful redemptive truths of all that God has brought him through. And at this point in the conversation, we're just talking practical steps and tips for youth pastors and youth leaders out there, how to help students as they're dealing with some incredibly difficult issues. And so, Jeremy, you got a couple of different things for us. I want to invite you that are watching, I want to invite you to join the conversation. So feel free to type your questions into the chat. And as we see them come in, we'll pause our conversation. We'll take your questions. We want you to be a part of this conversation. But Jeremy, let's go back to you and keep working through this list of tips that you have.
Yeah. I think another one I put was mercy breaks bondage.
Yeah.
Mercy can break bondages. And I think that's just something I learned in my own life and others. We talk about grace a lot, but mercy is so important to show. Again, if you're in ministry, your biggest goal is to represent Jesus. A lot of times people think it's to be a good preacher, but it's your biggest goal is to represent Jesus. Anytime somebody tells me that I remind them of Jesus, it's like just the biggest compliment ever. I mean, that's how you should live your life. And Jesus is a God of mercy, and, there's been quite a few instances in my life that mercy has made me who I am. When I deserved the punishment, but Jesus didn't punish me, it made me love him more and not want to do it again. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times there's been moments in youth ministry and just church in general that I've seen somebody that has deserved a punishment, has deserved to be kicked out of youth group, has deserved to be sent home from camp. You always have everybody. If you've ever gone to camp, there's somebody that you want to send home from camp, right?
Yeah.
And
on the first day, before you even got to camp.
Even when you're the guest speaker, you're like, I want to send how do I send that kid home? But I've learned in those moments, some of the greatest things you can do is to sit down with them and say, this is what you deserve. But because I love you, I'm gonna save you here. I'm not gonna send you home. I'm not gonna do this. And then what happens is you'll see that kid that you could have punished and fought against, and then you become their enemy. A lot of times for me, they became my best asset. They became my best person in life. They became the most loyal. That's where the loyalty came in. A lot of the young people that are in ministry with me now are the kids that I showed mercy to. And it can break bondage in their life. And the other thing that it does is it makes you more accessible to them. They trust you more to come to you with their problems when they've seen mercy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you don't have kids coming to you going, man, this is my issue, you might want to publicly display mercy. And it'll break bondages in people.
Yeah, just so counterintuitive to like what we think. We're like discipline, breaks bondages. Like, biblical study breaks bond. You know, it's like
Right.
no mercy. Like you need to. I think as leaders, this
Mm-hmm.
is something that is on the back burner. We're not often thinking, "Hey, how can I show mercy today?" And even as you
Right.
were speaking, I was just reminded, like it's the kindness of the Lord that leads people to repentance. That's what I felt
Right.
when you were sharing that point. Because God does this for us every day, but we often just kind of put it to the side
Right.
because we feel like, well, people should learn from their mistakes, and we try to
Right.
inflict
They need this.
judgment.
They deserve this. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness! It's like, what if you
Yeah.
got what you deserved? You know what I mean? Like,
Oh
what
man,
are
that's what
you
I'm saying.
doing that?
Yeah.
You know? Oh
And
my
also
gosh!
the Bible is pretty clear that you get the grace and mercy that you give. So I'm like, man, I got to give people a lot of mercy and grace because I need it. You know, I need mercy and grace in my life. I don't deserve to be where I'm at. So I'm going to give as much mercy. I mean, obviously there's times where you just got to set your foot down. But if there's an opportunity to show mercy, take that opportunity. I mean, it's just huge. I saw Dylan Johnson on here, by the way, too. Love you, buddy. Good to see you, man. So,
I remember. I think it was even after I had graduated from college and I was in full-time ministry. But still vividly remember this moment, being at an altar praying. I was prepping for a service. I think I was prepping for a sermon or something, and just having this revelation. And it sounds even weird to say now, but just having this revelation of like that I needed mercy just as much as anyone
Mhm.
else, and that even though my life
right.
had been pretty good and pretty solid and had some pretty solid teenage years and whatnot,
Mhm.
like that, I didn't deserve to go to heaven, right?
Yeah.
I had earned that, and sometimes
Right.
we need to be reminded, no matter how long we have personally been in ministry and
We
doing
need
this,
it.
we
Yeah.
need it, and we're just as guilty
Yeah.
as the next
Yeah.
guy. We need just as much mercy as the person down the road whose
Yes.
life is in a completely different state
Mhm.
than what ours is. The mercy of God, right?
I think probably I made a lot of mistakes in my younger years in youth ministry, but probably the biggest mistake I made as a young youth pastor, I was very religious. I had so many rules for the kids, and I wasn't living right.
Hmm.
I had hidden sins, and then I'm going into youth ministry going, well, these are what you need to do to live for Jesus, you know, and not really having any mercy at all.
Yeah.
And I put myself on this pedestal, and I fell off of it. It hurt, man. Like it was embarrassing, you know, and some of the stuff. And so you've just
Yeah,
you gotta show mercy,
yeah. It
and
reminds me
it'll
of the
break
two.
bondage. It'll help them. It'll break bondage.
Yeah,
So
it reminds me of King David. Obviously, we all know the Bathsheba story. We know, whatever.
right,
It's like that was horrible. God spoke to him about it, sent several prophets to speak to him about
right,
it, but he didn't lose his kingship.
right.
He was still the king,
Come
right?
on, yeah,
And that was the mercy of God
of God.
for a man who made a terrible mistake.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
his leadership grew out of that moment, not
yeah,
deteriorated because God displayed mercy towards him.
yeah.
Well,
My pastor always says. My pastor says all the time. He says people are attracted to beauty, not information. When you can show them
Hmm.
beauty, they'll get attracted to Jesus. If you show them information, I mean, you're attracted to beauty, not information. So the more beauty you can show them, and mercy is beautiful when you
Yeah.
show it.
Come on, man.
So
Come
I'm
on.
also
Wow.
thinking of it. One of the things that we're wrestling with so much in our culture right now is what we've all termed cancel culture, right?
right,
And so there's a tendency that we want to speak against it, and there's good reason for that.
hmm
But I'm thinking about what you've just said. What better response than to be people of mercy, and then to be
right,
people of grace, and then to not just speak against it, but to live and model and show a completely
yes,
different way, right? This is what Christians are
yeah,
supposed to do. Like everything about us is supposed to be countercultural, right? Everything about us is supposed to be upside down living in comparison with the secular culture. So instead of
yep,
just us preaching against or whining and
mm,
complaining about cancel culture, let's have a revival of what you're talking about, which is mercy that breaks bondage and mercy that breaks condemnation, which is the root of what
yes,
that culture is anyways, right?
yep. You're
Yeah.
allowed to sermons lived and not preached. That's what I
Come
always
on.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So jump back in here, Jeremy. You got a couple more good points. Again, for those of you that are with us live, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. We'd love to take them and have you be a part of this conversation. But Jeremy, you've been talking with us about tackling tough issues.
Yeah,
You've talked about find where they're bleeding. You've reminded us that every reaction has a reason. Mercy can break bondages. Here's the next one. We'll spend a minute talking about this. They have to be willing to change in order to help them.
Yes. And it sounds hard to say, but I've learned to say it is you just can't sow your seed on hard ground. And so you've got to keep loving and keep pouring, but you can't continue. So I've looked at kids and say, and I've said in my life, hey, listen, I love you and I'll always be here for you, but there's nothing more I can do to help you because you're not taking my advice.
Hmm.
And so I've given you all the advice I can, and the problem is, as a pastor, when you start dealing with these hard cases, you can lose all of your time with your family, with the people around you, pouring into leaders that you need to pour into. Because I'm an addict, so I can say this. If there's anything about an addict, we know how to just take people's time, money, energy, everything. We will use everything that we can.
Wow.
And so, I get to a point where I'm like, I've given you all my advice. You're not listening. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to let you go. I can't give you any more advice. When I start to see you take the advice that I've already given you, then I can come back and pour into your life again.
Yeah.
And I've let people go. And it sounds horrible to say, but if they're not willing to change, I never understood it. In rehab, they always used to say, you can't change a light bulb that doesn't want to be changed. And I'm like, that's so stupid, until I encountered a light bulb that was rusted into the socket and I could not get it out of there. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that makes sense now. And there's just sometimes this rust, and it's just like, man, I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to love you, but I can't keep running to bail you out.
Wow.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I think this advice is necessary for every one of my teenage girls trying to date these boys, flirt to convert. I'm like, yo,
yes, don't missionary date.
you can't change them, bro. They don't want to change.
Yeah.
They're like, if I just got him a Bible, I'm like, he won't even read it, bro. You know this.
Right.
Like, anyway, though, all that to say, the frustrations of a youth pastor, But no, I definitely love this point. This is something I'm trying to communicate to our team, because we end up having these incredible kids that are sold out for Jesus, but we don't give them the time necessary because we're focused on trying to transform these kids that they don't even want to be there. They don't want to change, right? And it's not we ignore them. We got to give them some energy, but then you could go the entire night, the entire month, missing that kid that actually needs the encouragement, which would take them over the top, dealing with a kid that doesn't even want to be there. So I love this point.
Yeah, it's hard.
Peter, I'm going to jump on your dating soapbox there. I'm gonna give you a good praise. You can preach this, right? So I used to always say, I say this to my daughters now, but I said it to the teenage girls in our youth ministry all the time. Let Jesus make a man out of him before you decide to make a boyfriend out of him.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's what we want. You want to try to help him out.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. It never works. Never ever works. But
God gave Adam a job before he gave him a woman. So
come on.
make sure he's got a job that loves Jesus.
Get a boy with a job, right?
Yes.
Because swag ain't gonna
and not
pay
Taco Bell. Like, he's got to be able to pay your rent. That's what I tell my daughter.
Let's go. Okay, so one more here. I like this point a lot too. I think we'll have some good discussion, maybe even some questions from those that are watching. But get them into serving and leading. And I think this one in particular kept people off guard because, a lot of our traditional philosophy towards discipleship is like, let's get you at a good place in your life before you start serving and before we allow you to lead.
Yeah.
And,
I need to see you live for Jesus for 6 months. Yeah.
I need them to go through growth track. I'm like, go through growth track, fill out our accelerate program, so how do we do this, man?
Yeah. Well, I've said it for years, and it was actually, I don't even know, I hate to say it sometimes, but I don't know if I was called into ministry.
I love it.
Isn't that, I never heard like this. I was actually sitting in rehab, and I thought to myself, how do I stay off drugs? I never cared about myself. A big thing with people in addiction sometimes is like, I grew up in church, so I was actually afraid of suicide, but I was slowly trying to kill myself. I didn't care about myself. I didn't care about my actions, never did. But I always cared about other people. I can actually remember being in crack houses in Kensington, Philadelphia, and just being like, man, you really need Jesus. And they're looking at me like, so do you, man. But I always cared more about other people. And I've learned this with people. When you become responsible for other people's lives, it makes you become responsible for you. At this point in my life, I'm a way better Christian because I'm a pastor. And that's pretty vulnerable to say, but it's true. I think of the people I'm responsible for when temptation comes my way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so when you can give people hard cases responsibility, it makes them begin to think and understand and carry a weight that they didn't have before. And a lot of people are like, well, you got to give them all this time and stuff. Listen, God blinded Paul and then put him into ministry. It was just like boom, boom. And so I think that, you can do that. And again, it's a lot of grace and mercy. And I'm not saying give them the whole world, put them on stage and that kind of stuff, but begin to get them involved, get them into leadership, understand the structures of leadership, that there's lower levels and higher levels and know where to put them. I don't immediately put people responsible for other people, but I'm going to get them involved in the sound booth or something like that to make sure that they start to feel responsible even to be at church. Like, man, I got to get there to run the sound. I've got to be a part of this, and it begins to
Yeah.
give them hope because you believe in them. So
Yeah.
definitely get the hard cases involved right away. And again, when you do that, they'll become your most loyal.
Yeah,
So
I agree. I love that. I try to invite people who are, maybe they're struggling. And honestly, the thing that will help them get out of their funk is leadership. I just invite them to our pre-service
yeah,
prayer. And then they hear me say
right.
things to our leadership team like, so as leaders, and they're like, wait, what do you mean? You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
that
Yeah,
self-identification sometimes first is the best piece because they're like, wait, why was
right,
I invited to them? And then I can have the conversation with
right.
them like, hey, I don't know where you fit, but I
Hmm.
see a leader in you. I see God's hand on your life. I
Right,
see whatever I see. And
right.
that's kind of how I try to navigate some of those kids because those
Yeah,
kids who are bold enough to be loud when you're preaching, they don't care about being in church. They don't care about what other
no,
people think. You're right. They are going to become
right.
your best leaders, man, for sure. And I can attest
They
to that.
really will. I had one of the stories I have is I had a young man. He was in leadership for about 4 or 5 months. He came to me and he's like, "Hey, I need to step down." I was like, "Why?" "I'm just really tired." I was like, "Bro, you're 17. You're not tired. Like, get out of here with that junk." You know. Um, and so just through some stuff, we're sitting in the office and he starts to cry and he said, "Actually, I've been dealing with homosexuality. I don't want to tell you because I think you're going to kick me out because of this that I'm dealing with. And so instead of telling you, I'm just going to quit." And I looked at him and I said, "You think I'm going to kick you out because you're dealing with homosexuality?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, um, "Actually, I'm going to probably promote you in the ministry." And he looked at me and he's like, "What?" And I said, probably 90% of my young men that are in youth leadership with me are looking at porn every night and they won't tell me. The
Hmm.
fact that you came to me and told me that you want to break this and that you're being honest with me, there's no way I'm removing you. We're gonna build together. And in that moment where I did not kick him out and we began to work together and what he was dealing with, it shifted him. And he is one of the best leaders I have. He's still accountable to me. He trusts me, and I love him, and he loves me, and he's living for Jesus. I mean, he's breaking it. He tells his story publicly. He's living for Jesus, and he's doing it well. Is he perfect? No, but he constantly fights against it. If I would have taken him out of leadership because of this sin he brought to me, it could have ruined him.
Hmm. So good. One of the things real practically that you're talking about, Jeremy, there, which I think I just want to highlight because some leaders really are still struggling with this idea of like, how do I create a serving or a leadership opportunity for a kid who's going through a lot or having a lot of challenges? And probably one of the reasons that you're thinking that way, that you're struggling with it, is because maybe your philosophy about how people serve and lead is that it's a one size fits all, like everybody does everything.
Right.
One of the things that we coach here at Lead the Generation and in any of our coaching sessions that we do is that you have to create what we call first serve opportunities for people to come in and
Right.
serve. And they're not really being put in a position of influence spiritually over their peers or over
Exactly.
another student. They're just
Yes.
having an opportunity to serve and have ownership, and that's huge. And I'll let either one of you talk about this for a second. But I'm
Hmm.
always encouraging youth pastors, like if you don't create serving opportunities, by the time students become juniors and seniors in your youth ministry, they're usually going to leave because they have no ownership at
Right.
that. at that age.
Mm-hmm.
And so working hard to create all these connecting points relationally and connecting points in ownership and leadership is huge. Even if they're not spiritually ready to go lead worship, they're not ready to lead your prayer meeting, they're not ready to pray with kids around the altar, but you can find a place for them to serve.
Yeah. The best lingo I used for it, and I mean, this is just practical, but we had student leaders, and then I actually had student staff. And so, because you have to build a student-run ministry, I firmly believe that. I wrote I don't have it anymore. I think I canceled it. But when I had a blog, I wrote it. It was called "The Youth Pastor Show Must Die," and it's basically like we should not be doing everything in our youth ministry. Give it to the kids, even let them preach. But so the youth leaders were what you said: servant, first serve, greeters, all that kind of stuff. Youth staff carried people. Did small groups, did that kind of stuff. So, and they carried a higher responsibility and actually made kids want to get on the youth staff because I would bless the youth staff with big dinners and all that kind of stuff. So
you need to bring that blog back. The Youth Pastor Show Must Die. Yeah.
I know I probably should find it.
That's good, man. That's just really good. If you don't, all of a sudden you're going to see Peter Reeves has a brand new blog out called The Youth Pastor Show Must Die.
Hey, write it.
It's going to be a YouTube channel as well. So
I think mine got at least 200 views. It was awesome. So
that's good stuff. Really good. Well, man, Jeremy, thanks so much for joining us. This has been such an incredible conversation.
Yeah.
Peter and I just appreciate you, giving your time and, being a part of this whole thing. I'm going to give both you guys a chance just to kind of give us some closing thoughts or closing comments, but, just so many good highlights to this conversation. Those of you that are joining us live, I'm glad you caught it live. If you're listening after the fact, real quick, Jeremy, how can they connect with you if they're not on live with us, but they're listening afterwards? What's the easiest way they could get a message to you or find you out there in the social media?
I check my DMs. You can, and my wife does too, just for accountability. But I check my DMs on social media. But
spoken like a pastor, he said, for accountability.
Yes. But you can message me online, or my email is jdonovan@trinitychurch.org, and I'd love to help any way I can. If there's any advice I can give anybody in this subject, let me know. Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
So good. Yeah. Peter, closing thoughts, man.
Yeah, closing thought is just that thank you for sharing your story, bro. And you are a product of the advice you just gave us today. The tips you just gave us, they worked in your life. And obviously, we started this podcast saying, you're one of the best pastors around the nation at what you do. And now you're in new spheres and doing different things. But thank you so much for the insight, man, because this is a thing a lot of people are thinking about, but we're not talking about. So we appreciate you.
Yeah.
So good. Well, listen, friends, we'll be back with you again next week, interviewing Jamie Paul. I want to encourage you, if you haven't checked out the Student Leadership Podcast, do that right away because we're producing some great podcasts several times a week, specifically for students to encourage them to grow in their leadership. And so excited for you to check it out and see the resource that we've developed there. And appreciate you being with us. Jeremy, thank you once again. Those of you that are watching live, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part. Peter, as always, bro, we love you. Glad you're here. And we will see all of you next week.
Love you guys.